It was a normal interview between Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro, but Joe Pesci started criticizing De Niro. Before you go to the story, please write which state you are watching from, and we will proceed to the interview. New York, autumn 2025. The evening air carries a sharp chill, and the asphalt of Times Square gleams after a brief rain, reflecting the neon signs in bursts of red, blue, and gold. Inside the studio of the popular talk show Night Pulse, nestled in the heart of Manhattan, the atmosphere buzzes with pre-show chaos. Spotlights hum, dressing rooms smell of hairspray, freshly brewed coffee, and a hint of expensive cologne. Tonight is special. Joe Pesci, a Hollywood legend known for iconic roles in Goodfellas, Casino, and The Irishman, has agreed to a rare interview after years of silence. His longtime friend and colleague Robert De Niro, whose stature in the film industry is unquestioned, joins him as a surprise guest. Everyone expects a warm evening of reminiscing, laughter, and nostalgia for the golden age of cinema. In the dressing room, Joe adjusts his navy blazer, his gray hair neatly combed, his eyes still burning with the spark that made his characters unforgettable. He looks younger than his 82 years, perhaps because of the restless energy that's always defined him. Nearby, Robert, dressed in a light gray shirt, sips mineral water and shares an anecdote from their days shooting with Scorsese. Both laugh, their voices filling the room with warmth. "Remember when you lost that prop gun on the Casino set?" Robert chuckles, his voice soft but with a slight rasp. "Scorsese was ready to strangle us both." Joe snorts, straightening his tie. "And you tried to pin it on me, saying I stole it." He playfully jabs a finger at Robert. "Bobby, you always knew how to talk your way out of trouble." Their agent, Larry, stands by the door, nervously scrolling through his phone. He smiles, sensing the evening will be perfect. The audience, mostly older folks who grew up on Scorsese's films, fills the studio, their chatter humming like a beehive. Everyone's eager for stories about the old days, the friendship of two legends, and the making of cinematic masterpieces. The show's host, Alison Krauss, a vibrant woman in her 50s with a flawless smile, takes the stage. The crowd erupts in applause. She greets the audience, cracks a joke about New York's weather, then introduces the guests. Joe and Robert step out to thunderous cheers. Joe waves awkwardly, as always, while Robert nods with his signature restraint. They settle into plush chairs, and the cameras roll. The first 20 minutes of the interview are flawless. Alison asks easy questions: favorite roles, working with Scorsese, how cinema has changed over the decades. Joe, true to form, tosses out quips, his voice alternating between loud and soft as he recalls funny set stories. Robert, more reserved, offers thoughtful insights about acting and the importance of art in today's world. The audience laughs, claps, and some wipe tears as Joe recounts his first role in a tiny Bronx theater. The studio feels warm, almost familial. Backstage, Larry breathes a sigh of relief. Everything's going as planned. But then Alison, sensing it's time to spice things up, asks a question that seems innocent enough. "Joe, Robert, you both worked on The Irishman, a film that sparked a lot of debate. Some critics say modern cinema is losing its soul to special effects and commercialism. Joe, you're known for your bluntness. What do you think?" The room falls silent, waiting. Joe smiles, but something sharp, almost dangerous, flickers in his eyes. He leans forward, his voice quieter but tense. "You know, Alison, I'll tell it like it is. Cinema's art, but it's become a business. And I'm not talking about effects. I'm talking about people who call themselves artists selling their principles for a paycheck." He pauses, his gaze sweeping the room, then locking on Robert. "And I've seen it happen with people I thought were my brothers." The audience freezes. Robert, mid-sip, slowly lowers his glass. His face remains calm, but his eyebrows lift slightly. "Joe, what are you getting at?" he asks, his tone soft but edged with tension. Alison, sensing the shift, tries to defuse the moment. "Wow, sounds like we've got a hot topic here. Joe, care to elaborate?" But Joe isn't listening. His voice sharpens. words spilling out as if he's held them back for years. I'm talking about how you, Bobby, backed that series. You knew they twisted the story we cared about. You knew they cut scenes that showed the truth about the unions, about the people we made The Irishman for. And what did you do? You signed on to their next project for millions. You sold our story. The crowd gasps. Allison, unprepared for this turn, opens her mouth but finds no words. Backstage, Larry clutches his head, muttering, "Oh God, Joe, what are you doing?" Robert slowly turns to Joe, his voice low and steady. "Joe, you serious? You want to air this out now, in front of everyone? We talked about this. You know how the industry works." "Oh, I know how it works." Joe stands abruptly, his small frame radiating fury. "It works by people like you taking the money and staying quiet while the truth gets gutted. I thought you were different, Bobby. I thought we stood for something." The studio buzzes with whispers and shocked murmurs. Allison, regaining her composure, calls for a commercial break, but Joe keeps going. "You knew they cut the scenes about Jimmy Hoffa because the studio didn't want politics in the film. You knew they turned him into a caricature instead of a working-class hero. And you just nodded because they dangled a new contract in front of you." Robert stands, his face flushing. "Joe, enough. You don't know the whole picture. You think I had a choice? You think I can just walk away from a project and not be blacklisted in this industry? I'm 82, same as you. We're not in the 90s anymore." "You always had a choice," Joe snaps, his voice trembling with emotion. "And you chose the money." The studio erupts in gasps and chatter. Allison, finally in control, announces the break, and the cameras cut off. But the tension lingers. Joe storms off the stage, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. Robert stands, watching him go, his fists clenched. Backstage, Larry catches up with Joe, who's heading to his dressing room. "Joe, what the hell was that? You said it'd be smooth. You just tore into Bobby in front of the whole country." Joe stops, his eyes blazing. "I'm done lying, Larry. I'm done pretending everything's fine while my friends get bought and the truth gets trashed. If this tanks my career, so be it. But I'm saying what I think." Larry shakes his head, his voice shaking. "This isn't just your career, Joe. You just declared war on De Niro." Meanwhile, Robert sits in his dressing room, gripping the armrests of his chair. He stares into the mirror, his gaze empty. His assistant, a young woman named Clara, nervously fidgets with her bracelet. "Mr. De Niro want some water? Or should I call the car?" Robert doesn't answer right away. Finally he speaks, his voice quiet but firm. "Fine, Joe. We need to talk. Alone." Clara nods and hurries out. In the studio, the audience lingers, buzzing with anticipation for more drama. Outside, New York hums. Sirens wail, crowds chatter, and the smell of hot dogs wafts from street vendors. But in this small studio, time stands still. Joe stands by the window in his dressing room, staring at the city lights. His heart pounds, but he doesn't regret his words. He knows truth comes at a cost, but silence costs more. The question is whether he's ready to pay that price, and whether Robert is ready to listen. New York never sleeps. Outside the Night Pool studio, Times Square's lights flicker, and the city's hum, sirens, honks, distant street musicians, seeps through the thick walls. In Joe Pesci's dressing room, he stands by the window, his small frame dwarfed by the sprawling city. His hands are clasped behind his back, his gaze lost in the neon haze. He hears Larry arguing with producers backstage, trying to salvage the show after the explosive incident. But Joe isn't listening. His mind drifts to the past, shooting with Robert, late-night talks over wine, the camaraderie that defined their careers. How did it come to this? The dressing room door creaks open and Clara, Robert's assistant, steps in. Her face is pale, her voice shaky. "Mr. Pesci, Mr. De Niro wants to talk." He's in his dressing room, alone. Joe turns slowly, his eyes narrowing. He nods without a word and follows Clara. The studio corridors buzz. Technicians, makeup artists, producers' assistants, all whispering, stealing glances at Joe. He walks on, ignoring them, his steps firm despite his racing heart. He doesn't know what he'll say to Robert, but he knows one thing: there's no turning back. Robert's dressing room smells of citrus candles and leather chairs. He sits at a table, gripping a glass of water, so tightly his knuckles are white. He looks tired, but his eyes hold no anger, just a mix of pain and resolve. When Joe enters, Robert gestures to the chair across from him. "Sit, Joe," he says quietly but firmly. Joe sits, crossing his arms. A heavy silence settles, thick as autumn fog. Outside, a muffled taxi horn blares, and someone in the hallway drops a crate cursing. But in this room, time seems to pause. "You really think I sold out?" Robert asks finally, his voice low, almost a whisper. "After everything we've been through, you really believe I'm like that?" Joe meets his gaze, his lips pressed tight. He wants to shout, to unleash the anger he's bottled up for years. But something in Robert's eyes, fatigue, pain, sincerity, makes him hold back. He sighs, his voice hoarse but calm. "Bobby, I saw you sign that deal with the people who butchered the Irishman. I saw you stay quiet when they cut scenes that showed what Hoffa fought for. You knew it was a lie, and you did nothing." Robert looks away, his fingers tapping the table. He seems to search for words but finds none. Finally he speaks. "Joe, you think I had a choice? You think I can just say no to a studio that's poured hundreds of millions into a project? I'm not a 20-year-old rebel. I'm 82. If I walk away, they'll find someone else, and I'm done." Joe shakes his head, his eyes burning. "You don't get it, Bobby. It's not about the money. It's about what we stood for. We made Goodfellas, Casino, The Irishman, because we believed cinema could tell the truth. Now you're letting them rewrite history because it's easier." Robert stands abruptly, his voice rising. "And what did you do, Joe? You just walked away. You vanished from the industry, left me to fight those sharks alone. You think it's easy for me? You think I didn't try to save those scenes? I fought, but they wouldn't listen. And you know why? Because I was alone. While you were sipping coffee in your Long Island house, judging everyone from afar." The words hit Joe like a slap. He opens his mouth to retort but stops. Memories flood back, avoiding Hollywood, turning down roles, retreating into his own world. Maybe Robert's right. Maybe he did abandon his friend. The silence returns, heavy but less hostile. Joe lowers his head, his fingers trembling. Robert sits back down, his shoulders slumping. They both look old, tired, but their eyes still burn with the fire that made their performances iconic. "Bobby," Joe says at last, his voice softer, "I didn't mean to hurt you. But I can't stay quiet when I see the truth disappearing. I thought you'd understand." Robert nods, his gaze warming. "I do understand, Joe. But you can't just attack everyone who makes compromises. The world's changed. If we want to make a difference, we've got to work together, not tear each other apart on live TV." Joe smiles faintly, sincerely. "You always were the better diplomat, Bobby." Robert chuckles, and the tension in the room eases slightly. But their conversation is cut short by a knock at the door. Larry bursts in, his face red with panic. "Guys, you got to see this. Social media's exploding. Everyone's talking about your fight. Someone leaked a clip from the show on X, and it's got 1 million views in 20 minutes. Joe and Robert exchange a look. They know what this means. Their words, their conflict, their truth now belong to the world. And the world won't be kind. What do we do? Larry asks, his voice trembling. Go back on stage? Issue a statement? Hide? Robert looks at Joe, a spark flickering in his eyes, the same one from their best scenes together. We don't hide, he says. We go back and finish the show. But this time together. Joe nods, his lips curling into a determined smile. All right, Bobby, but I'm not promising to play nice. Robert laughs, a genuine laugh for the first time that night. They stand, side by side, like in the old days, and head back to the studio. The crowd erupts in applause as they appear, but there's something new in their stride. Unity, strength, hope. Allison, clearly unprepared for their return, fumbles with her microphone. "Well, gentlemen, this is unexpected." She laughs nervously. Ready to continue? Joe and Robert sit, their eyes meeting. Joe speaks first, his voice calm but firm. "Allison, Bobby, and I hash some things out. We don't always agree, but we respect each other. And we both believe cinema's more than entertainment. It's a voice, and we won't let that voice be silenced." Robert nods, adding, "We're not perfect. But we're here to tell the truth. And if that means we have to argue, so be it. The important thing is not to stay silent." The audience explodes in applause, some standing. The older viewers, many of whom grew up with their faces on screen, feel they've witnessed something bigger than a talk show. It's a moment when two old friends, despite pain and differences, find common ground. The cameras cut, the show ends, but Joe and Robert's story is just beginning. On social media, their words spread like wildfire, sparking debates about art, truth, and principles. Some called Joe a hero, others a stubborn relic. Robert's praised for his restraint, but criticized for his compromises. But one thing's clear: their conflict, their dialogue, their refusal to stay silent has made people think. Outside, New York keeps moving. Rain starts again, pattering on the asphalt, mingling with the smell of coffee from a nearby cafe. Joe and Robert stand at the studio's exit, looking at the city. They don't know what tomorrow holds, but they know one thing: they spoke the truth. And that's something. New York wakes slowly. The morning sun breaks through gray clouds, bathing Times Square in soft golden light. The streets smell of fresh bagels, hot coffee, and damp asphalt from last night's rain. In a small cafe 2 blocks from the Night Pole studio, Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro sit at a table by the window. Espresso cups sit untouched before them. They're silent, listening to the barista frothing milk behind the counter and an elderly couple at the next table bickering about Broadway ticket prices. After the stormy night in the studio, this quiet feels almost healing, but it can't mask the tension still lingering between them. It's been 12 hours since their return to the stage. The video clips from the show have gone viral on X, racking up tens of millions of views. Headlines scream: Joe Pesci versus De Niro. Hollywood's fight of the century, and is their legendary friendship over? But other voices emerge, fan posts saying, "They said what we're all thinking," and articles calling their exchange a moment of truth for the industry. Joe and Robert have become more than scandal fodder. They're symbols of standing up for principles in a world where truth often bows to profit. Joe breaks the silence first, twirling a spoon in his hand, his voice quiet, almost pensive. "You know, Bobby, I didn't sleep last night. Kept thinking. Maybe I went too far. Maybe I should have talked to you first, not aired it out in front of everyone." Robert looks at him, his eyes, as always, unreadable, but the corners of his mouth lift slightly. "Joe, you've always been a hothead. But, you know what? I'm glad you did it. Someone had to say the truth, even if it hurts." Joe snorts, his smile faint but genuine. "You know I can't keep my mouth shut. But I didn't want it to look like I was against you. You're my brother, Bobby. Always have been." Robert nods, his fingers tightening around his cup. He looks tired, but there's something new in his eyes, not anger, not resentment, but determination. "I'm at fault too, Joe. I played by their rules too long. Thought I could change the system from the inside, but..." He sighs. "Maybe I was just kidding myself." They fall silent again, but this time the quiet is lighter, almost friendly. Outside, a young woman snaps a photo of a neon sign, and a taxi screeches to a stop, dropping off a passenger with suitcases. Life goes on, but for Joe and Robert, this moment is a turning point. "So what now?" Joe asks, his voice gaining strength. "We just go our separate ways? Or you got something in mind? Robert smiles, not his trademark restraint, but warmly, like in the old days. I've been thinking. Got an idea. But it's crazy. Joe raises an eyebrow, his eyes lighting up with curiosity. Crazy? Bobby, you know I'm all about crazy. Spill it. Robert leans closer, his voice dropping to a whisper, as if afraid of being overheard. We both know the studios won't change on their own. But we can make them listen. Let's do our own project. Independent. No studio money, no studio cuts. A film about Hoffa, the real one, the way the Irishman should have been. About the people who fought for their rights, about the unions, about the truth. Joe freezes, his eyes widening. He opens his mouth to respond, but Robert continues, I know it's a risk. We're not young, we don't have time for long fights. But if we do this, Joe, it'll be our last stand. And we'll do it right. Joe leans back, a wide grin spreading across his face. He looks like he's just been offered the role of a lifetime. Bobby, you crazy old son of a bitch. I'm in. They laugh, quietly, but sincerely, like in the days when they'd sit on set, hashing out scenes over pizza. The barista shoots them a curious glance, but they don't notice. In this moment, only their dream, their plan, their final fight exists. The next few weeks are a whirlwind. Joe and Robert assemble a team, old friends from the industry, who, like them, are tired of compromises. They recruit a young director, Emilio Torres, whose documentaries about the labor movement have won awards. Emilio, barely in his 30s, can't believe two legends want to work with him, but his passion for truth quickly makes him part of the crew. They write the script together, holed up in Joe's cramped Long Island apartment, where the air smells of old books and fresh coffee. Every word is their protest, their voice, their love for art. Funding is a hurdle. Studios hearing about the project turn away. No one wants to risk backing a film that challenges the system. But Joe and Robert don't give up. They launch a crowdfunding campaign, and fans, from elderly couples who remember their early roles to young activists inspired by their courage, start sending money. A post from Joe on X, Help Us Tell the Truth, goes viral with millions of reposts. Soon, they have enough to start shooting. The film, titled Last Stand, is shot in Detroit, a city where unions once shaped history. The set smells of machine oil, old wood, and sweat. Joe plays a union leader inspired by Hoffa, while Robert is his friend, torn between loyalty and compromise. The scenes are raw, real, brimming with pain and hope. Clips shared on X spark buzz, with viewers calling it the return of real cinema. But it's not all smooth. Studios push back, threatening lawsuits, refusing equipment, even trying to discredit Joe and Robert in the press. One evening, after a grueling shoot, Joe finds an anonymous letter in his mailbox. Drop it, old man, or you'll regret it. He shows it to Robert, who just laughs. They think they can scare us, Robert says, his eyes blazing. We survived the mob on the Goodfellas set. These suits won't stop us. Joe nods, but a seed of unease takes root. He knows the cost of their truth might be higher than they imagined. The premiere of Last Stand takes place a year later in a small Bronx theater, where Joe first started his career. The room is packed, older fans, young activists, workers who see their own stories in the film. As the credits roll, the audience erupts in applause. People cry, hug, whisper thanks. Joe and Robert stand on stage, their faces glowing, but their eyes tired. They know this isn't the end of the fight, but it's a beginning. After the premiere, Last Stand becomes a sensation. It screens at indie festivals, wins awards, but most importantly, it shifts the conversation. People talk about unions, workers' rights, the power of art. Studios, feeling the pressure, are forced to rethink their approaches. It's not a revolution, but it's a step. A small, vital one. Joe and Robert sit in the same Times Square cafe where it all began. Outside, rain falls, pattering on the glass, and the city hums. They're old, tired, but content. We did it, Bobby, Joe says, his voice hoarse but warm. We told the truth. Robert nods, his smile soft. And the world heard. But you know, Joe, this is just the start. They raise their espresso cups, their eyes meeting. In this moment, there's no anger, no resentment. Just friendship, belief, and hope that even a small step can change the world.